There are certain truths in history that were never meant to be spoken aloud. The kind of truths that, once heard, can never be forgotten. Tonight you'll hear one of them. Imagine a Roman emperor, Tiberius Julius Caesar Augustus, ruling the most powerful empire on earth, yet secretly retreating to a private island where innocence was systematically butchered in marble chambers beneath the sunlit waves. Capri. A name that today evokes beauty and luxury. But beneath its cliffs lies a history so vile, so depraved, it has been deliberately erased from polite conversation. You are about to witness the horrors that unfolded there, not as an observer, but through the eyes of the young victims whose lives were shattered for imperial pleasure. Forget sanitized history books. What you are about to hear is raw, unfiltered corruption of power. Once you fall into this rabbit hole, you will not come out the same. This is not just a story of cruelty, it's a blueprint of how elites have, for centuries, masked their most perverse desires under the veil of civilization. Tiberius's private paradise was no myth. It was an industrialized program of abuse, calculated with precision, designed to devour young souls. As we peel back the layers, you'll realize this wasn't just Tiberius. It was a pattern that echoes in the darkest halls of power to this day. You're not just learning history. You're uncovering a forbidden manual of psychological domination. And once you hear it, you will never look at leadership, royalty, or religion the same way again. This is a descent into truths too poisonous for mainstream history. Only those who seek mastery over illusion will dare continue. Tiberius did not start as a monster. He was Rome's golden boy, intelligent, disciplined, a soldier's soldier. But absolute power is a crucible. For Tiberius, it cracked something fundamental. By 30 AD, he withdrew from Rome, retreating to Capri under the excuse of ill health. But what unfolded there was not recuperation. It was the systematic orchestration of depravity. Capri was the perfect trap. Jagged cliffs sealed it from escape. Treacherous currents isolated it from intrusion. Every approach was guarded by imperial ships. Once you stepped onto that island, you belonged to the emperor in ways words fail to describe. Tiberius constructed a sprawling villa complex atop Capri's cliffs, gardens, palaces, hidden chambers. But it was the pools, vast, intricately designed bathing complexes, that became the epicenter of his perversions. These pools weren't for relaxation. They were laboratories of control, designed for activities the architects never documented but understood with chilling clarity. Young boys, sourced from coastal villages, were trained to become Tiberius's little fishes. They weren't slaves in chains. They were puppets of pleasure, their innocence submerged in a cycle of conditioning that broke them without leaving marks. Tiberius didn't just want obedience, he demanded transformation. A child's laughter turned into silence, their games turned into rituals of humiliation. And behind this, a cold, calculated system ensured a constant supply of new victims. Agents scoured fishing villages, watching for boys who excelled in swimming, noting their breath-holding capabilities and reporting back to Capri. Once selected, these children were no longer names. They were commodities. The emperor's appetite was insatiable, and the machine of power fed it with ruthless efficiency. The villa became a theater of control where every marble tile, every underwater passage, was a stage for twisted performances. And the audience was a single man who believed himself a god. Picture this. You are a 12-year-old boy. Yesterday you were diving for seashells under the Mediterranean sun, your father's proud gaze on your back. Today you awaken in a marble chamber on Capri, stripped of your name, surrounded by boys who no longer speak of families. Your exceptional swimming skill, once a point of pride, has become the very chain that shackles you. The journey to Capri was a blur of fear. Imperial galleys arrived unannounced, their soldiers armed with official decrees and an unspoken menace. Parents who resisted lost their lives. Those who complied received gold coins, blood money for a stolen child. Inside the holds of those galleys, the future slaves of Capri sat in suffocating silence. Some wept. Others sat hollow-eyed, already broken by the knowledge of their fate. As you approached the island, the cliffs of Capri loomed, majestic and indifferent. But it was the silence that was suffocating. No birdsong. No laughter. Just the creak of oars and the cold, assessing gazes of imperial guards. Upon arrival, a brutal selection began. Physicians examined every inch of your body. Breath-holding tests. Flexibility drills. They weren't seeking children, they were inventorying assets. Those deemed suitable were given clean tunics and led into the labyrinth of marble villas. The rest simply disappeared. No explanations. No farewells. The silence was deafening. That first night, lying on a narrow bed, you learned the true sound of captivity. The soft, rhythmic splash of water from the pools mixed with hushed whispers from older boys. They spoke of rules that ensured survival. Rule 1, never speak unless spoken to. Rule 2, never meet the emperor's eyes. Rule 3, never refuse. The emperor's moods were unpredictable. A smile today could become a death sentence tomorrow. Every moment was a test, and failure was not an option. Training began immediately. You were assigned to an older boy, Marcus, though older meant 15 at most. But his eyes, they were the eyes of a man who had lived centuries. Marcus wasn't just a survivor, he was a mentor forged in the emperor's personal crucible. His task was simple: break you in fast. There was no cruelty in Marcus's tone, only urgency. He didn't enjoy teaching you how to stay alive in this place, he knew he was feeding you to the beast. His lessons came in whispers after lights out. Never show fear, he said, but never look too comfortable. The emperor hates arrogance. You were taught how to swim without splashing, how to dive without sound, how to hold your breath for minutes while keeping your face serene. But the most horrifying lessons were physical. How to use your mouth and hands underwater, for tasks no child should comprehend. It wasn't framed as abuse. Here it was service, a duty wrapped in the velvet language of imperial privilege. The villa's marble pools became your classroom. Beautiful structures designed with sadistic precision. Underwater tunnels connected chambers where screams couldn't escape. The water temperature was regulated, not for comfort, but to ensure the boys maintained peak physical performance. Every detail was an instrument of control. The psychological warfare was relentless. You were praised for compliance, rewarded for endurance, and punished with cold indifference for any hesitation. Yet, the cruelest manipulation was the illusion of choice. The emperor allowed you to volunteer for tasks, turning obedience into a twisted badge of honor. The boys who pleased him received better food, warmer clothes, and fleeting moments of human kindness. Those who resisted, vanished. The marble pools were your world now. Above the surface, Rome continued in ignorance. Below, in the echoing silence of Capri's aquatic tombs, childhood was a currency spent for the emperor's fleeting amusement. The first time you were summoned to serve personally is a memory carved into your bones. Tiberius reclined on a marble platform, his aging body draped in silk, steam rising from the water as if to mask the rot of his desires. His eyes were not the eyes of a ruler, they were the cold, calculating eyes of a spider waiting for his prey to tremble. You had been prepared for this moment, but preparation is a lie in the face of living nightmares. The emperor spoke gently, his tone soft, almost grandfatherly. But every word was a hook designed to sink into your mind, blurring the line between command and suggestion. "My little fishes," he would say, "show me how the sea has blessed you." You were ordered to swim intricate patterns around his submerged body, your movements choreographed to please his whims. Occasionally, his hand would reach into the water, beckoning you closer, commanding you to perform acts your young mind barely comprehended but instinctively feared. Marcus had warned you, never hesitate. Hesitation meant punishment. And punishment on Capri was not swift. It was slow, methodical, designed to strip away the last fragments of will. Yet, amidst the horror, Tiberius ensured there were moments of false kindness. A gentle pat on the head, a morsel of exotic fruit, a word of praise. These crumbs of affection became the oxygen you craved, a manipulative cycle that tethered you tighter to your captor. Over time, survival wasn't just about obedience, it became about anticipation. The boys who lasted longest were those who learned to read Tiberius's moods before he even spoke. Fear became your compass. The marble pools were no longer just water. They were liquid prisons where breath was a privilege, and every surface reflected your eroding humanity. Each dive beneath the surface was a descent into yourself, and each resurfacing revealed a child less innocent, less whole. But Tiberius's cruelty wasn't limited to private chambers. The island of Capri itself was a stage for his depravity. Among the cliffs and gardens, the emperor orchestrated spectacles that blurred the line between ritual and abuse. Public punishments became common, not as justice but as theater. Boys who failed to meet expectations were paraded before the villa's elite guests, their shame weaponized as entertainment. Imagine being forced to perform humiliating acts, not in the shadows, but under the scrutinizing gaze of Rome's aristocracy, senators, generals, priests, all complicit in their silence. Yet, the darkest ritual was the Piscina Mortuorum, the pool of the dead. It was whispered among the boys, a pool reserved for those who disobeyed or worse, displeased the emperor beyond forgiveness. None who entered it returned. You learned quickly that survival depended on invisibility. You became an expert in reading body language, sensing danger before it struck, perfecting the art of appearing useful, but never drawing too much attention. The Emperor's games were designed to destroy the mind before the body. Every task, every performance was a test of loyalty, but also a gradual erosion of your identity. You no longer existed as an individual. You were a reflection of Tiberius's power, a pawn in his theater of dominance. But amidst the suffocating control, there was a subtle, rebellious truth. Some boys learned to manipulate the manipulators. They discovered that flattery, strategic compliance, and carefully timed displays of skill could buy small freedoms. Not escape. Never escape. But in a world where a kind word from a monster could mean the difference between life and death, even crumbs of agency became precious. You adapted. Not out of strength but necessity. Capri was not a place you survived by being strong. It was a place where survival meant learning how to be invisible in plain sight. By now the island had transformed you. The boy who once dived for seashells was gone. In his place stood a hollowed reflection, sculpted by rituals of obedience and survival. But the darkest trick Capri played wasn't physical. It was psychological. Tiberius didn't just own your body, he colonized your mind. The Emperor mastered a brutal form of emotional starvation. Moments of praise became more addictive than food. A simple nod from him could make a boy weep with gratitude. It was the ultimate corruption, turning abuse into a privilege, making you crave the approval of the very hand that crushed you. And here's where you watching this right now must make a choice. You've now glimpsed how power corrupts innocence, how systems of control disguise themselves in beauty and ceremony. If you're ready to shatter the illusion and reclaim the part of yourself that refuses to kneel before corruption, I want you to comment this phrase twice below. I see the hidden hand. Write it once for awareness. Write it twice to lock in transformation. This act is not for me. It's for you. A symbolic act of rebellion, defying the forces that want you blind and compliant. Every generation has its Capri. Different faces. Same games. Same manipulation. And only men who dare to see the hidden hand ever break free. Tiberius is long dead, but his blueprint of control echoes through history. Governments, religions, elites using rituals of submission masked as tradition. You've been watching these rituals your entire life. But now you're seeing them for what they truly are. The next step is yours. Tiberius's depravity escalated with age. As his physical body decayed, his hunger for control grew more sadistic. He began orchestrating performances where boys were forced into elaborate reenactments of mythological scenes. Narcissus admiring his reflection, Ganymede serving Zeus. But in Tiberius's version, these tales became grotesque parodies, rituals designed to strip away the last fragments of childhood from his victims. The emperor believed himself a living god. Capri was his Olympus. The boys? They were his demigods, crafted and destroyed at his whim. No act was too vile if it reaffirmed his dominion. But the true horror wasn't just in what he did, it was in how the imperial court normalized it. Senators, priests, scholars, all watched in complicit silence. Some even participated. Power has a way of muting morality when survival is at stake. The villa's corridors echoed with the unspoken rule, what happens on Capri stays on Capri. But silence is its own form of violence. Every adult who turned their gaze away, every official who wrote falsified reports of imperial leisure, became an accomplice in Tiberius's descent into monstrosity. The island was no longer a place. It was a machine, one designed to erase identities, devour innocence, and perfect the art of domination. You learned this not through lectures, but through every breath you took underwater, every glance you avoided, every command you obeyed while suppressing the scream in your throat. And yet, within this suffocating darkness, there remained a flicker of defiance. A dangerous thought that even Tiberius, with all his power, could never fully kill. The thought that one day his empire would crumble and the truth would surface. There were no escape plans on Capri. No daring rebellions. The island was a perfect closed system of surveillance and psychological warfare. But sometimes cracks appeared. You noticed it first in the eyes of the older boys, those who had survived multiple years in the emperor's orbit. They had mastered a subtle art, passive resistance. Small acts of defiance, imperceptible to the guards but monumental within. A glance held a second too long. A whispered joke in the shadows. Tiny rebellions that declared, "You don't own my soul." These gestures didn't change their fate, but they preserved something crucial, the memory of who they were before Capri. For you, it began with a thought. A dangerous, forbidden thought. He is not a god. Repeating this silently, even as you obeyed his commands, became an act of internal warfare. Tiberius wanted worship, not just obedience. By refusing to believe in his divinity, even in secret, you reclaimed a fragment of power. But such defiance came at a cost. The emperor sensed resistance like a predator smells blood. Boys who failed to please him were subjected to the chamber of reflection, a windowless room where isolation and sensory deprivation drove minds to the edge of madness. You knew of boys who entered that chamber and never returned the same. Some stopped speaking altogether. Others became so compliant they seemed empty, bodies moving without will. This was the true genius of Capri's horror. It didn't need physical chains. The island turned your own mind against you. Escape wasn't about running. It was about preserving a piece of yourself in a place designed to hollow you out. Every breath you took was an act of rebellion. Every thought that said, "I still exist," was a silent victory. As months bled into years, Capri became a twisted home. You no longer remembered the sound of your mother's voice. Your own name became a relic. Here you were only little fish. But amidst the marble pools and whispered rules, a chilling realization dawned. Tiberius was grooming more than bodies. He was engineering minds. He didn't simply seek gratification. He sought to craft reflections of his own corrupted soul. Older boys were tasked with training new arrivals, perpetuating the cycle of abuse. Those who excelled in serving the emperor were rewarded with minor privileges, turning victims into collaborators. This was psychological warfare at its peak. You weren't just surviving, you were being conditioned to normalize the unthinkable. The villa's opulence became a gilded cage, where each luxurious mosaic under your feet whispered complicity. Tiberius's ultimate triumph wasn't in the acts of depravity, but in convincing his victims that this was normal, that this was how power works. And here's a truth that will burn in your mind. Capri was not an anomaly. It was a prototype. A blueprint of how elites throughout history have ritualized control, cloaking abuse in ceremony, turning perversion into privilege. When you study the rituals of secret societies, the indulgences of royal courts, or the traditions of religious orders, you begin to see Capri's shadow everywhere. The methods evolve, the faces change, but the machinery of domination remains. And most never realize they're inside it. There were whispers of escape, not physical escape but mental. Some boys discovered that detachment could be a shield. They perfected the art of performing without feeling, creating an internal void where Tiberius's reach couldn't penetrate. Marcus called it the empty room. A mental sanctuary where you could retreat, even as your body obeyed commands. But it was a fragile shield. The emperor, in his decaying brilliance, devised ways to crack it. He introduced new games, psychological tests designed to blur reality. One such horror was the mirror rite. Boys were forced to watch their own reflections while performing tasks for the emperor. It wasn't enough to break your body, he wanted you to witness your own corruption, to see yourself as he saw you, an instrument of his will. Over time, boys stopped recognizing themselves. Identity dissolved. That was Tiberius's ultimate goal. To erase the individual, leaving only tools. But in rare moments of solitude, when guards grew lax, you'd catch glimpses of others who still clung to fragments of selfhood. A subtle nod from Marcus. A fleeting smile from a new boy who hadn't yet been broken. These micro-rebellions were invisible to the emperor, but to you they were lifelines. Reminders that beneath the layers of submission, a spark still burned. The body could be controlled. But the soul, that was a battleground Tiberius could never fully conquer. The end came not with a rebellion but with rot. Tiberius, now a bloated husk of paranoia and depravity, withdrew further into his chambers. His indulgences grew erratic, his demands increasingly sadistic. Capri's machine was breaking down, not from defiance, but from the unsustainable weight of his madness. Rome began to stir. Whispers of the emperor's island atrocities reached senators too ambitious to stay silent. The machinery of power shifted. New vultures circled. Eventually, Tiberius's death was announced. Whether from natural causes or assassination remains a shadowed mystery. But Capri's chains didn't vanish with his last breath. The survivors, those boys who endured, were scattered across the empire. Some were silenced with gold. Others vanished into monastic orders. A few, the rare few, lived on, haunted but awake, bearing the scars of knowledge too dark for daylight. You were one of them. And as you stood on the mainland once more, breathing free air, you realized a horrifying truth. The island never truly leaves you. Tiberius's systems of control, they follow you. They echo in every institution that demands obedience cloaked in ceremony. You had seen the hidden hand, felt its grip, and now you could never unsee it. Capri wasn't just a place. It was a lesson. Now you, listening to this, are marked. You've heard what they tried to bury. The beautiful island of Capri, marketed today as a paradise for the wealthy, was once a laboratory of human degradation. And here's the truth they'll never admit. The methods perfected there never died. They evolved. Look around. The rituals of humiliation turned into modern initiations. The control of innocence repackaged as discipline. The silencing of victims hidden beneath charity and opulence. The machinery still runs. Different faces. Same games. You've been walking through these rituals your entire life, oblivious to the invisible chains crafted by those who studied Tiberius's playbook. But now you've seen it. You know the architecture of control. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. You stand at a threshold. You can pretend this was just a dark story from history and return to sleep. Or, you can choose to stay awake. Stay dangerous. Because knowledge, once possessed, becomes a weapon. A weapon they fear. Comment below once more, I see the hidden hand. Let them know you're awake. And remember, this channel isn't just telling stories. It's pulling back the curtain. If you're ready to dive deeper into the forbidden truths they tried to erase, subscribe. But only if you're ready to carry the weight of what's next. The rabbit hole is endless. Welcome to History in Silence.